Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel today. I appreciate you joining me. Today, we are going to cover a highly tactical video, something that is very specific that I continuously run into throughout my career with early to mid-level professionals, sometimes the senior level as well, but mostly that early to mid-career where people can be more effective. And that is running successful, effective meetings. This is a skill that is invaluable for your career. And the earlier that you can not only begin to do this effectively, but you can get the practice, you can get the reps, the more that it will set you up for success in the long term. This is going to be key when it comes to the promotional aspect. The fact that you can run effective and successful meetings, meaning you're consistently pushing things forward, you're consistently getting things done. So to anyone above you, this is going to look fantastic. And then once you actually do achieve those promotions and maybe do get to that team leader, do get to that manager or senior manager, those initial levels of management and leadership titles, the people that report to you are also going to be incredibly thankful that you are running effective meetings. I'm pretty sure we have all been there where we are inside meetings that just end up leading to another meeting or nothing gets done. Or it's just a giant airspace vacuum and all of us walk away going, well, that was useless. And so that's what we're trying to remove here is remove those bad meetings, at least the ones that you are in control of. And we'll also touch on how we can leverage this in a managing up scenario so that you can maybe help to set the tone in a very professional and respectful way to enable your leaders to also run more effective meetings, as that is a key part of overall professional success and progression. Is making your boss look good. So if you can kind of do that in a professional, respectful way, that's also going to behoove you for moving forward. So as I said, we've all been there with the meetings that we walk away and we just are like, what was the value add? What was the purpose? Or like I said, the worst case scenario that we all despise is just a meeting to set up another meeting. Let's dive into the 10 rules because the first one is going to begin to remove the uselessness of the meetings in your life. So rule number 1 out of our 10 rules for successful and effective meetings is going to be evaluate the need of the meeting. In today's day and age, we have plenty of other technologies. We don't have to get in a room or even hop on a Zoom or Teams or Slack call. We can use the other functions of these same technologies. We can use Slack chat. We can use Teams chat. You can use email. You can use group chats. You can use channels. You can use all of these other aspects of these products, and they might be more successful. And really what the distinguishing factor here is going to be, do I just need to have 1 or 2 questions answered? Or maybe it's a project and you just need from 3 or 4 different people, 1 or 2 questions answered. Think about the scope of what needs to get done. Is this something that I can shoot off an email? These people can get back to me either later today or even the next day pretty quickly, and they can determine the best time to do that so that they don't interrupt their focus or their productivity. If it's something that really warrants much more of a discussion, a melding of the minds, multiple departments, or even just a larger size group, then that's where maybe the meeting makes sense. So this isn't to say don't hesitate to schedule meetings, but make sure before you throw on calendar time and interrupt people's flow states, interrupt their productivity, and take them away from being able to accomplish elsewhere, that you're actually asking, is this needed? Or can this just be done in their own timeframes when they deem most effective through a different communication method? So that is rule number 1. Evaluate the need of the meeting before you schedule it. Rule number 2, is it worth it? So this is going to piggyback on the need. So great. You have now deemed, yes, it warrants a discussion. It warrants a melding of the minds, a back and forth, and those sorts of components. Is it worth it? There's 3 different components to here, but really how we're looking to measure this is going to be salary spend and ROI. Very quickly do meetings add up from a dollar value perspective. So if you just simply look at the average employee, the average full-time salary employee in the United States makes $60,000 a year. It's roughly $30 an hour for simple math. And so if you have 10 people on a meeting at that average, that's a $300 meeting. Is it worth it? You also have to factor in, is it going to interrupt their flow state and their productivity? I mean, the answer to those questions are yes. So the question is, to what degree? Because if you are taking them away from their accomplishment, maybe they're working on a $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 project that you are interrupting them from. And I know it's hard to always see that, but this is where you can at least quantify that salary spend, and you can get just rough ideas. And think about that $60,000 average as your true average and baseline from an individual contributor level. So if you are inviting managers, directors, VPs, executives, this could very quickly get to, instead of that $30 an hour, you're talking 80, 100, 150, 200. And now you have multiple people. I mean, it's not unreasonable for a meeting itself to simply cost thousands of dollars in actual salary spent. And that's not including the productivity interruption or the overall optimization and efficiency by interrupting people's flow states and their day. So this is a key component. So first you ask yourself, is this even needed? Do I need to do this, or can I do it elsewhere to not have the negative productivity and optimization impacts, and then also not spend the salary on that? But if you do need the meeting, then making sure that it's worth it. This is also key to a specific aspect of making sure you're inviting the right people. Keep that a limited list. But this very much goes into rule number 3. So if you do deem that it is going to be a worth it meeting, then you got to make sure you're determining the intent. How is this meeting going to be measured as a successful and effective meeting or not? Is this to determine which project to do? Is this to determine how to spend money? Is this determining to hire somebody? Think about the actual expected result. And so while being effective is a factor of a successful meeting, we're really measuring the effectiveness of your ability to run a meeting by first determining this intent. By making sure you have this, it is the only way that you can measure the overall effectiveness of the meeting. Because if you don't have an intent and you look back and try to go, well, was that effective? You have zero clue. You have no baseline to go off of. So you must determine the intent in order to determine if your meetings are effective. And when you don't meet that intent, you don't deem it an effective meeting, then now you can circle back and go, okay, well, where did things go off the rails? Was it not enough time? Did I not guide things well? Did I not set the meeting up for success? What other rules out of these 10 that we're going to cover did I not follow to make sure that the meeting was overall effective? So you must, again, before sending out this invitation and inviting the people, you must know the intent and how you're going to measure if the meeting was effective. That leads directly into the agenda. Rule number 4, send an agenda for every meeting. This will help keep it in guardrails. It will also help people to know what to talk about, maybe what notes to bring. It allows them to prepare effectively. And one of the key components of the agenda, of which there are 4 components for rule number 4, is make sure you tell people what the intent of the meeting is. This way you are all on the same page as to the problem you are trying to solve and what the expected outcome will be. And this also allows people to maybe send information and documents and things like that ahead of time that are going to support that intent and get everybody even more prepared going into that meeting. So again, these 4 things that we're going to review here real quick are sort of that pre-meeting efficacy and success. Making sure, rule number 1, the meeting is necessary. Rule number 2, is it worth it? Rule number 3, determine the intent. Rule number 4, send the agenda. Now, I mentioned in the agenda you have 4 components, one of which is making sure everybody knows the intent. But also in that agenda should be the topics to be discussed, any supporting materials that you have to help people be prepared or understand maybe a little bit of context, as well as asking if anybody else has supporting materials beforehand that they can send and attach to the meeting invitation. And then 4 is more of a support to that intent, but making sure everybody knows what the expected result is of the meeting. And this will allow you to, in a stress-free way, keep this meeting in a guardrails. Because if we do start to deviate in this meeting away from discussion that does not contribute to the expected result and intent and the topics, then now you have a very simple thing to lean back on. Hey, I need us to make sure that we are going to solve this problem in this allotted time. Can we take this discussion outside of this meeting? Awesome, perfect, great. So this really sets the tone for you to be successful in making sure that the guardrails are here. Now, before we go on to the other rules, I mentioned these are kind of the 4 for that pre-meeting success. I mentioned early on, we're also going to figure out and talk about how we can manage up. And so really when it comes to managing up in a professional, respectful, and successful way, this is just going to be asking your managers to do these things and make it for yourself. Hey, so that I can be effective in these meetings that we're having, these weekly check-ins, these project meetings, whatever it might be, would you mind sending out an agenda ahead of time? And in the agenda, have these 3 or 4 different components: the intent of the meeting, the topics to be discussed, supporting materials, and expected result. Can you do this ahead of time? That would be really awesome. Then you can also even question, hey, I noticed we're doing meetings on A, B, and C. Can we just do this in a different format? Can we start an email chain with the vendor, or can we start an email chain with the necessary people? And you might get a lot more reasons as to why not. And that's okay, but at least spark the discussion. And the key here is not to tell your manager what they're doing wrong or tell the leader that you're trying to get them to be more effective because they're currently ineffective, but it's simply asking questions, and you're kind of putting yourself at the center as to why and the overall benefit of people as well. So you're just going to ask, hey, can we get an agenda before the meeting so that we can all be prepared, or so that I can be prepared? That would be super awesome. I want to make sure that I am not scrambling before the meeting. And so this makes it look like you want to be effective. It makes you look good because you're trying to always be effective on any given moment, and you're not attacking the person on the other end. And then asking them to make sure that they're also sending out the intent included in that agenda so that everybody can determine if it's an effective meeting or if the format needs to be changed. Hey, I noticed we do these meetings. Do you really think that we could maybe move them to a automated report or an email chain or these sorts of things? Because I definitely have been in those meetings where it's more of a eval of reports and analytics, and that could just simply be solved by the system that produces the report automatically sending out. And then that email that you program for automation says, hey, if you'd like to discuss, let us know. Right? So then you can do your meetings as needed when maybe the analytics are confusing, or maybe there's a spike in a given area and you need to discuss why. All right, so we have summed that portion up. Now, we're going to get a little bit more still slightly before the meeting is going to occur, but those are kind of a 4 categorical rules that we can lump together as feeding into each other consistently. This one is going to circle back a little bit to the is it worth it portion, where we're thinking about salary spend. But this is going to expand beyond that. I mentioned when talking about the rule of it being worth it to make sure you invite the right people. And that is rule number 5. So this is where you need to take a little bit of a step back. Yes, this is a pre-meeting rule, but the reason I'm not including it in those is because you need to think a little bit more big picture here. So you might have a project that has the given participants and the given people in it, but you really need to maybe think about, well, what stakeholders does this affect? What vendors does this affect? What maybe contracts or legal or compliance? You really need to really take that step back about the discussions you're going to have, because it might not just be the hands-on people or the decision makers. You really need to think about the spider web of intermingling here as to maybe who to include. And so this is going to be heavily tied to that. Is it worth it? Because the scope of the right people could grow very, very, very easily. But at the same time, you might also be able to eliminate people very easily, because maybe it is just a discussion between 2 or 3 people. It's a very small scope discussion, and this doesn't really bleed into other aspects. Then just make sure you're only inviting those people. But I like to talk about this one individually because, yes, keep that rule number 2 in mind of keeping the ROI and salary spend in check. But don't do that to such a degree that you are unwilling to invite the right people and expand on those meetings. And if this is a decision that's going to branch out into a bunch of people, that actually usually makes the ROI much easier than you think. Take into account if it is a project that might affect your compliance or legality or a customer experience component. If you're going to maybe tank your customer experience with a given decision, I mean, that could literally be your revenue stream. Compliance, legal, contracts, those could be actual fines, whether that's imposed by regulatory bodies. It could be loss of contracts because you didn't adhere to a specific clause. So again, the ROI on these types of decisions becomes very, very easy as the scope expands. So I just want to make sure to stress that you don't have to be so strict and so stringent, and also to not be short-sighted in these two rules of making sure that you are being effective from a cost perspective, but also making sure that you're getting everybody together at one time, because that is what's going to facilitate the right decision and making sure that you're not costing the company. All right, so now we're getting into rule number 6, which is going to be one that is hard to know over time, but I'm going to stress by saying err on the side of caution, which is set a time limit. I always tell people to start out with a shorter meeting. The amount that you can actually get done in a 15-minute focused meeting is shockingly well. Now, most people default to a half hour because depending on the email client you're using, it's what it defaults to. Outlook, for instance, defaults to a 30-minute meeting. So you don't even think to maybe do a 15 or maybe even a 20 or a 10, but you can do as short down as a 1-minute meeting in Outlook. You just have to manually set the time limit. It's not necessarily going to be easy from the drop down. So really think about how long should this take? And sometimes you're going to get this wrong. And sometimes your meeting is either A, going to run long, or B, maybe have to lead to another meeting because a key participant is back to back. And unfortunately, you misjudged. So this is going to be a skill that you get reps. This is why I said early on that these 10 rules, the earlier that you can get the reps, get the practice, and just start doing them, the more it's going to behoove you, because this is definitely one that it just experience is key here. I also want to stress Parkinson's law. This is a key component to this, which is that work expands to fill the time. So if you schedule a 1-hour meeting, you will find a way to make it a 1-hour meeting, even if it was 15 minutes effective and 45 minutes garbage. So this is why I say err on the side of caution. And the worst case is that you have to do a second meeting to follow up. But at least you know maybe that one should be able to be pretty quick because all you have to do is solve this one particular meeting. And you can maybe even seek advice at the end of the meeting. Hey, we're coming up on 2 minutes. We haven't quite solved this problem yet. I apologize for not scheduling enough time. Are people able to run over? The answer is yes. Great. If it's not, okay, we have this one agenda item left outstanding. Here's the discussion we're in the middle of. What do we think we need to schedule a meeting for? Seek other people's advice, right? So now you're opening up to the mentorship and the coaching as well. Oh, hey, this should be a 15-minute discussion. Awesome. Schedule that for the next time. Or I think it'll be maybe take another half hour or so. Or maybe you get it into circling back. Is a follow-up meeting needed? Maybe you're to the point that the remaining agenda item can be done through email or chat or group chat or channel exchange, these sorts of things. So it's very rare that by setting the time limit and shortchanging yourself, that it's actually going to be this overwhelmingly negative impact. But in the long run, it's going to be a positive impact because you're going to make sure that things are focused. You're going to make sure that the least amount of time is wasted. And going back to putting yourself in the shoes of being a meeting participant right now, I'm pretty sure everyone's going to thank you for having a shorter meeting than a longer one. Just ask yourself how you would feel in that given situation. So rule number 6, set a time limit. All right, rule number 7. So this is actually a piggyback off of, I will give full credit here to Alex Hormozy, which is 20 minutes of preparation will make you look 20 IQ points smarter. So at this point, we've done a significant amount of meeting prep. The final piece of this that I think is key is prepare the opening. Prepare your quick elevator speech that is going to recap effectively the agenda. What is the intent of the meeting? What are the topics you're looking to cover? What is going to be the expected result? And reiterate that you want this meeting to be short and focused. Do we have any questions? Let's begin. And this also sets the tone that you are going to be the moderator to keep the discussion in check. Because again, you gave people the agenda, so they already know that. You gave them supporting materials, so they already know that. Other people may have sent supporting materials, so they should have reviewed those. And now from the top of the meeting, you're taking 30 seconds to reconvey that information and jump right in. So then when you do say, hey, Susie, can we bring it back? Hey, John, can that actually be taken outside of this meeting? Awesome. It's not nearly as offensive because that tone has been set. And you will discover your own way to do that because, again, you don't want to lose yourself in this, but these are effective methods for making sure that the meeting is successful. So by having a little bit of a prepared opening, it's going to be wonders. And I don't mean sit here and spend a half hour rehearsing in the mirror. Again, I mentioned 20 minutes of prep is going to make you 20 IQ points smarter. But so this should really take you a minute, 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes tops that you just kind of rehearse and you gather those materials and everything. But you're really just reading and reiterating everything that's already been sent. So it should be a very quick opening preparation. So rule number 7, prepare the opening. All right, so this is going to be probably a very overlooked rule, but rule number 8 is use the agenda. You took the time to do this preparation. You took the time at the front end of the meeting to reiterate the agenda. Use it. I know this is obvious. And like I said, it is probably the most overlooked rule, but it's very easy for us as humans to get caught up in the conversation, the deviation, the, oh, shiny object over there. But use the agenda. You did all this prep work for a reason. And now that you're here, make sure you stay on topic, make sure you stay on task, and make sure that this is what's driving the overall conversation. Now, you don't want to do this to a degree that it's so rigid that people can't be organic and it actually sparks true, productive, organic conversation. So, mentioning before, when you are maybe going to interrupt somebody and say, hey, is this a conversation that's needed? Or, hey, can we take this outside of it? I do like starting with the approach personally of, hey, can you help me understand how this conversation is relevant to the topic here? And now you're opening up for them to educate you. Oh, maybe here's the piece that you don't see, or here's why this is relevant. Or they also admit out loud, oh, it's not, I can take this elsewhere. So that's one of my favorite approaches to making sure that you're sticking to the agenda is if you're unsure how it's relevant, ask how it's relevant. But if you are sure that it's not relevant, steer back to the agenda. Hey, can we focus on what we need to talk about here? Here's where we left off. Let's pick up from there again. So rule number 8, use the agenda. All right, so now that you've gone through your discussion, you've done your 15, half hour, 40-minute meeting, whatever it might be. At the end, the key here is going to be 2 different components. One is inside the meeting and one is outside the meeting. So rule number 9, roundtable summary. So at the end of the meeting, make everybody reiterate what their action items or role coming out of the meeting is. And I will give full credit here. This is a rule from my wife. Brilliant way to end a meeting. It is so effective, and it makes sure that you're not hand-holding and that people were paying attention and actually contributing. So make sure that you're not just simply going, all right, so John, you have to do A, B, and C, and Susie, you have to do X, Y, and Z. But that it's, hey, John, what are your action items coming out of this? What are your takeaways? Susie, what were your action items? What are your takeaways? Awesome. Okay, here's my action items and takeaways. And then everybody reiterates it out loud that has something to do and has these takeaways. That's why I say it's a round table summary. It's not you simply saying the summary as the person leading the meeting, or even if you're going to try to manage up in this scenario, then it's not just the person leading the meeting, whoever that may be, isn't just simply summarizing the meeting, but that each person is saying out loud what they agreed to, what they must do, and what their takeaways were. And finally, post-meeting, send a follow-up. Now, if you research this and Google how to send a follow-up, what's best practice, yada, 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 it's going to say to do it around no later than 24 hours after the meeting. That's insanity. Do it right after. You already have the meeting time allotted. If you have back-to-back meetings, fine. Do it after the next one. But the second that you are free, send those recaps. Get it out of your way. And that way, again, you had people verbally say what their action items are and what their takeaways are. But now it's immediately in writing and everybody's on the same page, so there can't be a delay. You can't have John come back 2 days later and say, oh, well, it took you 24 hours and it's taken me 3 days to do this. No. They can start same day. They can effectively start immediately after the meeting on working on that thing. And while, yes, they may have verbally said it, now you're covering the different learning centers. So you might also ask, well, what is the follow-up? What is that post-meeting email? So this is going to consist of 3 different components. And it's really based all around of what that roundtable summary was, which is what decisions were made, what are the assigned tasks and action items and who they're assigned to, and what were the agreed upon deadlines for those given assigned tasks. So now everybody's on the same page. It's been said verbally. It was said in a roundtable fashion. Now it's in writing. And now, especially if you're somebody who's maybe managing this project or is just a key stakeholder, or you're just trying to make yourself look awesome for that promotion, when you reach out because the deadline maybe isn't met or you're coming up on it and you haven't heard anything or there's no progress, you have every right to do that follow-up, and it's not unprofessional or it's not disrespectful. So if we circle back here into the rules that are the latter 6. So after we send the agenda, or after we build the agenda, sorry, let me clarify. We have make sure you're inviting the right people, rule number 5. Rule number 6, set a time limit. Rule number 7, prepare the opening. Rule number 8, use the agenda. Rule number 9, roundtable summary. And rule number 10, send the follow-up. So looking at each of these here when it comes to managing up. So each of these, the key here at the root is going to be, again, framing this in form of questions. It's going to be asking the person running the meeting, your leader, your superior, whoever it might be, questions to maybe get them to admit as to how they're not running effective meetings. And so inviting the right people is completely valid, because this is where you can open it up so that you can learn to be more effective and say, hey, I saw that you invited Ryan to this meeting. Can you help me understand why Ryan needs to be there? And now you're going to get insight into maybe the cross-department aspect that you didn't know about, or a particular thing that maybe Ryan is doing on this project that you weren't aware of. So you might get insights into how the company operates in ways that you're unfamiliar with, or that there's bigger picture items that you are unaware of. And so this is just a great way for you to learn the company operations, how they work, and again, the cross-department collaboration. Or at the same time, maybe they come back and go, oh yeah, Ryan doesn't need to be there. That makes complete sense. And then they just remove Ryan from the meeting and let him know, hey, sorry, didn't mean to invite you to this meeting. It was an accident. Something very, very simple. Now, the setting a time limit. So again, this one is going to be much harder to frame in a question scenario. This is one that I actually do recommend not framing in a question and framing in more of a direct scenario, a direct feedback, and saying, hey, I noticed that we have this check-in meeting, this project meeting, or whatever it might be. And consistently, there just ends up being a lot of fluff conversation or unnecessary conversation. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Maybe just kind of gauge the input. Now, you can parlay this into another question of saying that, is there a reason they're typically this long? Have they historically been this long? Or you can even just say, what do you think about taking this down from a 30-minute to a 20-minute and seeing how that goes? And again, you might engage in a conversation to learn a little bit more about how your manager or supervisor, whoever, thinks, and maybe why they leave that room. But this is one that, again, I probably the only one out of these 10 rules that if you're going to manage up and try to make a correction, I do actually recommend giving your advice and your 2 cents in a little bit more of a direct fashion, and then kind of parlaying that into, do you agree? Do you disagree? What if we cut this down? And because it'll make them aware of why you're asking that question as to the overall time limit. Now, the prepare opening one is going to be very difficult. Just thinking about the ROI one, it's a very difficult one to manage up. I put the prepare and opening one as well because it's hard to really give the advice on this. And so I would say the best way to manage up in the preparing and opening is just doing it yourself. Build a culture that whenever you run a meeting, you have an opening and other people will follow because they'll see, oh my God, John runs 15-minute meetings. These things are like clockwork. They are so smooth, so worth it. Nobody's leaving going, that was a useless meeting. And they're going to ask themselves why, I promise. Now, use the agenda, rule 8. So this one can be a manage up scenario similar to the setting a time limit. I would say these two go hand in hand. So you could say, hey, I notice there's a lot of side conversation, unnecessary conversation, or people talking about this and that. Do we really need to have that in this meeting on a consistent basis? Hey, can you send an agenda out so that we, can make sure that we are staying on topic? These sorts of different components. Again, you're going to be a little bit direct, but sort of back to the original rule of building the agenda and the managing up scenario there was, hey, for my own knowledge and so that I can be effective in these meetings, can you make sure to build an agenda ahead of time? And that would be awesome. And if you could include A, B, and C, and D, that'd be beautiful. So then the using is sort of a similar one of, hey, I noticed that we're not adhering to this. Now, depending on your given unique situation, you could also be the one that maybe acts as a leader of the meeting and saying, hey, how is this relevant to the discussion? You could do that, but you need to be very careful with this type of mechanism because you don't want to come off as stepping on your superior's toes or making them look bad. Again, making your manager look good is a key to your own success as well. So managing up here can be a little bit dicey, but I would still recommend asking the questions of, hey, I noticed that there's A, B, and C conversation. What can we maybe do to minimize this so that we can all be more effective and get back to it? Now, the roundtable summary is a very easy one to manage up. If your manager is not doing this, then before the meeting ends in that last minute or two, you can just say, hey, can we quickly go around and just make sure we're on the same page of what we're supposed to do? Here's what I believe I have to do. Am I correct? Yes. And then that will kind of set the tone for other people to start doing that. So this is a very, very, very easy one to do. And by you setting the example, but that's the best way to do it is if the meeting is going to end without that roundtable summary, then that's how I would do it is, hey, can we all just make sure that we're on the same page? We all have our action items, deadlines, etc. Here's what I have. Am I missing anything? No? Okay, awesome. Now who's next? And then you'll just kick off that roundtable very organically and making you look awesome. Now, the follow-up is going to depend on who the person is that ran the meeting. So it's going to be hard to kind of nudge them in the right direction. But you can honestly ask for yourself and just say, hey, can you send me a quick recap so that we are all on the same page as well after that meeting? And you could wait a day or two if you want it. I wouldn't do it immediately after. If you're the one holding the meeting, like I said, send the follow-up if you are the one responsible for it immediately after. But if you're trying to build that culture, manage up, maybe get others to do it, then that's where I'd say, wait that 24 hours and just say, hey, can you make sure to send out that follow-up so we are all on the same page and we can just kind of start this email chain and we can all let each other know when we're done. And that's a great way to frame it too, is I just want to make sure that we're all communicating when we complete our action items. And especially if there's dependencies, if person A has to do something before B, then it just starts that communication. You can piggyback off that email chain and that's the dedicated purpose. All right. So at this point, we have covered the 10 rules for effective, successful meetings. Quick recap on all 10 of these rules. Evaluate the need is rule number 1. Ask, is it worth it? Rule number 2. Determine the intent of the meeting. Rule number 3. Send an agenda. Rule number 4. Invite the right people. Rule number 5. Set a time limit. Rule number 6. Prepare an opening. Rule number 7. Use the agenda. Rule number 8. Roundtable summary. Rule number 9. And send a follow-up. Rule number 10. If you guys have any other rules to add, leave them in the comments below. If you have any questions on these rules, leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on if you think that these are great practices as well when it comes to the meetings. Leave me a comment, send me a message. If you found this meeting or this video incredibly effective for yourself, then please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. And until next time, I appreciate you joining me today.